It's an odd duck, the grocery store bank. It's a real bank. Vault, guard, everything, but something always made me think it'll be easier to...
Easier to rob? Sure, I've thought that too.
You have?
Yeah, I see it. All the distraction of a grocery store gives the robber good cover.
Huh, I wonder how they will screw this up. Oh, well that's how. American Dad has been one of my favorite shows since it started back in 2005. Recently, it has started its 21st season. I think the numbering is kind of odd. TBS certainly considers it so that's good enough for me. But nevertheless, I've always liked the sharp, witty writing, the way the world has become more and more abstract as it's remained in this kind of pseudo-reality. And with the use of extensive callbacks, it's kind of formed this constant narrative. But somehow, for me, the show has remained kind of fresh. And sure, there's a few dozen misses in its 21 seasons, and those 21 seasons have 24 episodes each. But the truth is, even if I don't like it, someone else does. In fact, no matter how bad an episode is, there's always someone or something about it that has always made me laugh. In fact, no matter how bad an episode is, there's always something in the episode that's made me laugh. Which brings us to the first episode of the 21st season, titled The Grocery Store Bank. The premise of this episode is that Stan, Franny, and Roger are robbing a bank. And that's it. There's no side story, and my entire thought process through this episode is this really it? This is so boring. But let me show you how boring it actually is. The episode itself begins with the opening of a new grocery store titled The Grand Grocer. Francine and Roger are inside talking about the store's convenience.
It's so smart. People come to get fish. They see the beautiful fish, right? They're smelling the big fish smells, listening to the high-powered sink washing bloody scales off the thick forearms of the fish-chopping men. What are they going to be? Hungry, right? I already wanted fish later, but now I'm hungry for fish now.
They run into Stan in the freezer aisle, and all three began talking about how convenient it is to have a bank inside the store. What follows is Stan, Francine, and Roger talking about the best way to rob the grocery bank store.
This is a robbery. Put the money in your wastebasket, then lock yourself in the vault. Wait a second. That's 68 letters. You're gonna need a bigger cake.
Wastebasket full at bank counter. Janitorial to bank counter, please.
I put the real money in the rice, and in the flour...
Counterfeit money, counterfeit die.
Keep in mind, all this has happened in premise of 9 minutes in. This is a 21-minute episode. But the plot still isn't gone, oddly enough. The bank got robbed according to their exact plan, with each of the three managing to argue with each other, wanting to know exactly who of the three robbed the bank. And all three explore the rice section for the money, where they run into Detective Turlington. They go home, argue more, where they find a secret burner cell phone and take it to the police. There is, however, a video on it, which shows all three of them robbed the bank and took medication to forget about doing so. There is, however, a new hiding spot. What follows is the three searching for the money. The family runs into Turlington after figuring out that the money must be hidden in a large jar of almonds. The family starts a riot to escape, and the family escapes as the money burns. Frankly, I thought this episode was one of the worst ones so far. Now, I know what I said about someone else liking a show no matter how bad it is, or an episode no matter how bad it is, but personally, I just found it so utterly boring. But before I get to the negatives, let's start with some positives. Remember what I said about the show's callbacks? There's actually plenty in this episode. For example, James Garfield is still mayor. I enjoy the fact that he is still mayor since Wayside died in Stan's Thunderdome-style prison. Now, Grant was brought back to life with CIA technology. I enjoyed the idea as a whole, but this episode has one of the worst jokes written for him so far, in my opinion.
I inaugurate unto this town a most glorious mercantile that I understand is to be racially integrated?
I will admit that it got a chuckle out of me, and then I immediately regretted it. It's kind of one of those jokes where that seems funny at first, and then you think about it, And it drives home just how horrible the joke really is and how horrible of a person you really are for laughing at it. Well, see, here's the thing. What I liked about Andrew Garfield is that he is a clone brought out of time. And up until now, he didn't touch any of the racist jargon, any of the racist stuff from his time period. He was perfectly funny without it.
Why would you do this?
Because you need to learn about history. And who's a better teacher than someone who is living history?
How did you get the old-fashioned clothes?
Easy. I dug up his grave and put him in his funeral suit.
What?
I'm kidding, Haley. I had Garfield do it.
There were thousands of worms in me.
But here, having been in the show since season 12, so for nearly 10 years, only now is he making a joke about integration. Honestly, as a history buff, that would be the number one difference between his time and ours. He would have noticed it by now. Maybe they could have touched on it well, but I honestly not sure how even I would do it. I could think of a few ideas, but honestly, it's probably not worth touching. And frankly, one of the worst crimes in US history is treated as just a joke. Anyway, there's other callbacks that got a chuckle out of me. When the family's talking about where to hide the money, Francine suggests Gold Top Nuts, a reference to season 17, episode 10, Gold Top Nuts, where the family is stranded on a desert island. Looking in the background, and then you have the background stuff. For example, I saw Roger's wife from the episode The Ground to the Riot. Principal Lewis is also here, which he always is, let's face it. The CIA psychiatrist is seen during the riot, and quite frankly, I got a lot of joy out of that one because it seems to be a double reference, because the CIA doctor keeps dying in episodes, and look at that massive fireball. I really don't see anyone surviving that, so clearly it's another cloning job. But I think Officer Turlington steals the show. We haven't seen him since season 14, episode 9, where he was murdered and stuffed with sawdust by Principal Lewis's gang of teens. And which, on that note, thematically and technically, since all Turlingtons are brothers, this is the first time we have seen this particular Turlington. Now, that being said, I know Roger is dressed as someone in this episode, but I don't know who. Then there's the symptoms and the list of drugs. I know one of the symptoms is listed as memory loss, and normally I would have caught the memory loss a lot sooner when the minute I heard the bank was robbed, but because honestly it's a very American Dad thing to do. But honestly, I was so disinterested even halfway through this episode that it never occurred to me. I honestly get the sense that there's some big joke I'm missing. Like this entire episode is a rip on heist movies, for example, or a specific movie in general. The truth is, my entire disinterest just might be the fact that I don't like heist movies, and therefore, because of that, I am not enjoying this as much as I can. But at the same time, there are episodes like season 11's Ballad of Billy Jesusworth, where there's a plotline of Roger and Stan getting into a basketball game. Well, at the same time, but there's also the plot in that same episode where Steve is trapped in a locker, and a parody of R. Kelly's Trapped in the Closet. But this episode doesn't have that kind of synergy. It doesn't have a B plot. Because I'm not invested in the A plot, I'm not invested in it at all. There's a brief moment, however, where Steve is talking about how we haven't heard from Mama and Baba, Francine's adoptive parents. So Steve is saying that they might be dead. That lasts long enough to fulfill contractual obligations for the main cast, contractual obligations among the main staff before the plot picks up again. How bad is it? Well, you know that scene where all of them are discussing how to break in the bank and going through the various plans and their pitfalls? That takes about 2.5 minutes. This is a 20-minute episode. It really feels like this plot is one long joke that just isn't funny for me. Can I talk about just how dumb this plan actually is? I get that's part of the joke, and honestly, I kind of enjoy the stupidity. But honestly, it's almost too stupid. It's stupid to the point where it wraps around and ends up becoming an intelligent parody and just becomes as stupid again. Like in season 2, episode 3, Failure is Not a Factory Installed Option, Stan starts to lose confidence in himself with his failures as a negotiator in the CIA.
So here's a passport, $1,000, and the names of all our operatives.
Great. And you should be receiving your first issue of Essence in 6 to 8 weeks.
Awesome!
Smith, what in God's name?
So to get himself feeling better, he goes out to buy a new car. What he ends up doing is buying basically a dozen new cars in a blimp, putting the family through financial turmoil, getting them kicked out of the house and homeless, and then faking insanity. And then he runs into the salesman, who then, out of guilt, takes back every car he sold him, and then gives him 5% off of his brand new SUV. Stan reveals that he faked the entire thing. That is also a stupid plan, but somehow works because, especially in those early seasons, Stan is just a narcissistic monster who can't really think 2 steps ahead. But here it's just dumb. I know it's supposed to be, but this is just too stupid even within the confines of the show. And since I don't watch heist movies, I'm missing out on the joke. And can I just say that Mama and Baba deserve better than to be written out like this? Honestly, I love that Francine was adopted. I wish the show could have dealt more with it. But the way they're written out kind of bugs me. Emphasis on the kind of. See, political correctness is a tricky issue, and that doesn't even get into the idea that it would need to be in its own episode. Doing this way makes kind of a dark joke, rather than embracing politically correct quagmire, as Mama and Baba feature several racial stereotypes. And I get the idea that they don't want to mess with it. I just kind of wish that Mama and Baba got a bit more respect. Overall, I think that if I enjoyed heist movies more, this episode would hit harder, but without a B plot, it falls flat. I think one of the reasons is because Stan, Francine, and Roger are the ones pulling it off. It's so out of character for 2 of these 3, it helps kill it. Now, had it been, for example, if it had been Roger being the chaotic asshole that he is, Bullock on a cocaine binge, and Stan sucking up to Bullock because he wants a promotion, it would have worked a whole lot better, as well as feeding into the parody. Then there's just all the randomness that I normally naturally hate. It's like the second beginning of the episode where Mayor Garfield makes a joke about racial integration. It's something that's just so random that pops up in this episode, and kind of does every bit of world building, lore, and logic that the series has set up so far. But that is one YouTuber's opinion. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and please, everyone, have fun and enjoy your day. I do have a Patreon, and honestly, there's not much there now, but I assure you that in the future there will be, and